Good morning. We're here at ComforCare Toronto Central. My name is Chisholm-DeVeau. I'm with Spectrumx, the coaching and consulting firm. This is our Spectrumx Why series, discovering why entrepreneurs do what they do. As mentioned before, we're here with Renee Henriquez from ComforCare Central, located at 2 College Street, Suite 205, Toronto, Ontario. Good morning, Renee.
Morning, Phil. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Great. So, just to share with our audience, we're discovering why entrepreneurs do what they do. So, if you could just share with us what ComforCare does.
So, ComforCare is a senior home care company. And we go into the homes of seniors wherever they call home. It could be their home, it could be a retirement home, it could be a long-term care home. And we help them get through their day. So the people that work with our seniors are called personal support workers. And the goal of our company is to allow a person to live as independently as possible with the best quality of life that at that time they can have. And we work with people who just need help to go to get their hair cut, all the way to end-of-life care around the clock and palliative care. So we have a spectrum. Our clients look different.
So it's a very valuable service for sure.
Well, we think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. And what led you to, what did you do before becoming an entrepreneur?
So I started out my career as a registered nurse. I worked in the neurotrauma unit at St. Mike's and at Sunnybrook in the neurotrauma unit. And then I worked as a clinical research nurse, working with people that had traumatic head injuries and helping to trial drugs that would hopefully improve outcomes of traumatic head injury. And I did that I did the clinical research part for 5 years, at which point I moved into clinical research in the pharmaceutical industry. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One was that my dad was sick at the time. He was suffering from cognitive impairment of a type we didn't know what it was at that time. He was elderly, he was living in his home. I was an only child, and I was the only one around to take care of it because my mom had passed away. And when I think of why did I do this, I'm not sure that didn't have something to do with it, but I'll get to that later. So I worked in clinical research in different pharmaceutical companies. It required me to do a lot of traveling. And I think that working in the hospital was too emotionally intensive for me at that time with working with my dad. And this was a fun job, and I got to come home and take care of things and then sort of leave again. I worked then in business development, which was a sort of next progression in that industry. And that's where the rubber hit the road for me after a few years. Initially, it was a lot of fun. Initially, I felt that my expertise in nursing and in clinical research structure was needed.
Right.
And then it evolved into a real sales model, American sales model. And it was no fun for me anymore. So I'm not sure if you asked me yet why I did this, but I think it's the next sentence is going into that.
Okay.
So at that point, I mean, anyone that knows anything about the pharmaceutical industry knows that there's a lot of change all the time. Companies are buying companies, and so that was going on in the background, and I was hitting 50 at that time. And I attribute it to a midlife crisis. Now, some people think of buying a sports car. I thought, no, let me start a business. And that also didn't come out of nowhere. I have always wanted to have my own business. I never had the confidence. It never seemed to be the right time. I never knew what I was going to do. Friend had made for me one of those picture books for my birthday, and one of the things said, I hope for you, and it said that one day you have the business that you want to have. So clearly back when I was sort of in my 20s, this is something that people knew that I wanted to do. And it was just the right time. It's like I didn't want to go on to the next job. The company I was with had all kinds of internal changes happening. I knew that there were layoffs coming. And usually when that would happen, you would start, sniffing out for the new job. And I wasn't doing that, which was unlike me. And I just realized, no, this is it. This is the time. If I don't do it now, I never will do it.
Fabulous. Now, ComforCare is a franchise, correct?
ComforCare is a franchise. So in the beginning, I took a year actually to make this decision final. And I looked at starting my own home care company, and then I looked at buying a franchise. And in home care world, a franchise gives you a business model, some pamphlets. And I thought at that time, I really don't know. I've worked in a business, but a big business, but I didn't know how to run a company.
Right.
And I was aware of that. And so as I looked at the costs and the benefits of both, of starting my own and or buying into a franchise, it seemed to make more sense to buy into something that already had an established business model and some support. And I don't regret that decision. I think now that I know what I know, I might not do that again, but I didn't know what I knew. Like that's not a legitimate argument at this
Starting a business was very foreign to you.
Absolutely.
Working in a business was.
And I remember the day that I started coming into the office and sitting down, and there was a bunch of boxes around the place, a desk and a phone. And I just sat there and thought, where's the IT guy? Oh, Jesus, there's no IT guy. What do I do? Right? And so, yeah, it is very foreign.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fabulous. So we asked the big question, why? We emerged in there from where you came from. What have you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur? Big question.
I've learned so much about myself that it's interesting. And I think that you have one of the biggest things about being an entrepreneur is you better be willing to take a look at yourself. Because your business is a baby of you. If you're someone that likes to hold on to control, that's going to show up in your business. If you're someone who's eternally optimistic, that's going to show up in your business. It's like having a baby with all the same personality traits as you have. So unless you're willing to look at yourself, take a good look at why things are happening the way that they are, it's going to be a rough road for you. You have to be willing to look at yourself.
I really appreciate that you saying that, because I've often said, as a journey of an entrepreneur, every day you wake up facing yourself.
Yes.
And your fears, your
Yes.
weaknesses,
Yes.
your strengths,
Yes.
everything, every day.
Yeah.
Unlike going to work,
Yeah.
that you have a network
Yeah.
that's supporting you, and you're just one piece.
Right. And I think there's pros and cons to everything, right? And I think that I certainly did, and I know people do, have this romantic idea of a business. And somehow, as a business owner, I always feel like people think I have a yacht in Greece somewhere. No, I don't. People have a romantic idea about it, though. Here's the great thing. Your schedule is yours. That's the good thing and the bad thing. Your schedule is yours. Your creation of how you build your business and what you want it to be is yours. Again, a lot of responsibility that you don't think, everything about it is yours. And there's something incredibly satisfying and rewarding about that. But there's also the downside to it is less traumatic than the downside to being in that corporate world when I just really didn't want to be there anymore. It felt like there was no out. Now, when things are going bad, they don't go on and on forever. They resolve, because it's in your control to resolve it. So they resolve. So when you have a challenging week, like we did last week, this week's going to be better. And I didn't find in corporate world it was that way. Once that trigger hit where I was dissatisfied, it just kept on until I moved on.
Okay. Is that something to do with control of your own life?
Well, control in that you have the ability to change things. You've created your own policy and your own structure, so you can change that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. You're sharing a lot. Thank you.
I like talking about this topic.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
What's the hardest business lesson that you have ever experienced that has brought you the greatest sense of achievement?
Two big ones come to mind. One is that people will tell you in business that you don't need to know this or that. You can just outsource that. I personally disagree with that a little bit. I think that you need to know something about what it is that you're outsourcing, or you can't manage it. And that's one thing I would maybe have done a little differently. Is not just hand over whole things to people without really understanding how to do it myself first. That's one thing. The second thing, and I think this is probably the biggest thing, is that boundaries. There are some clients that you're not going to be able to serve. Your service offering doesn't suit them. And you're trying to shove a square peg in a round hole,
Right.
and it doesn't work. And I think you have to go through a few of these before you learn, okay, this is what we do. If that's not okay, then maybe we need to look at how else can you get what you need. But I'm not sure it's from us. And that's a hard lesson to learn when you're someone that just wants to do everything for everybody.
Right.
Because it doesn't work.
So that wonderful trap of wanting revenue, wanting to help, and service people to the best of your ability, sometimes they're not a good match.
No, and it's one thing when you're just when you're trying to do something that's not working and it's just affecting you. But when you have staff that it's affecting as well, that's where, as a business leader, you have to stand back and say, okay, this isn't working.
So
I need to do something about this.
from your corporate world, you obviously had leadership skills. Going into your own business, how have they grown?
Well, there's a lot of things that I never did in corporate world that now I have to do. So for example, when I used to do all the hiring, when the only thing that was asked of me in corporate world is that I participated on a panel of people that interviewed someone sometimes. And I'd get a nice big package from HR, and I'd write some things on it, and then I'd package that nice package up, and someone would come and pick it up and take it away. Now I have to know, how do I place that ad? How do I do that interview where I'm looking for what? All the little detail. How do I hire someone? What are the labor laws around this? I did not have to know all those things before.
Right. Wow. Sounds like a huge learning curve.
Oh, yeah, way bigger than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. Yeah. But that's what also makes it fun.
Because you're constantly learning? Is that
Constantly learning. Constantly learning.
And
Yeah.
how does that make that fun?
Well, I guess I just like learning. So, when I think of why, people want to know, why did you do what you did? And one of the reasons I've learned, that it is actually, I love building things. You know, as a kid, if my mom told me, well, you can't have those shoes right now, I would try to build them out of styrofoam. Like, I love building things. So I think that's sort of the genesis of where it all comes from. That is challenges. So it keeps it exciting for me.
Wonderful.
Maybe it's not mentally healthy. I don't know, but I to always want to be stimulated in that way. I'm not sure. Sometimes I wish I wasn't like that, but I am.
But you still have the control.
Yeah. Yes. Most days it feels.
And lastly, if you could share with our audience 3 things that you would share with someone considering going into being self-employed.
The first thing is, I think, to take a real look at yourself and be honest with yourself about how comfortable you are with risk, about how comfortable you are with change. And I would say half people like that, half people don't. That's one thing, because there's always going to be change, and there's certainly going to be risk. But maybe the first thing I would say is that it is so rewarding, but make sure you're in it. Don't do it until you have not left yourself an option to fail. Like, other people can do it, you can do it too. And if you look, to my mind, there's always going to be times in a business when you look at the stats of when do businesses fail. Well, it's always like 16, 18 months. Well, the first year is super exciting. You're like all over it, And then the second year, the rubber hits the road. You're like, where are the clients? How do I fix this? This is when the rubber hits the road, and that's when businesses fail. Because if you give yourself the opportunity to back out the minute things get tough, you're going to back out.
Well, right.
Which is, I think, where the part comes in about what, there's a school of thought that says you don't have to be passionate about what you do. What I think is that passion is what takes you through those times.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Much like Arlene Dickinson says, persevere, persevere, persevere. As you're saying, that's where the passion helps you persevere.
I think so. For me, it did anyway.
So to recap those 2 things?
So to recap those 2 things, make sure you're all in. And be honest with yourself about if you're someone that has a personality that can take risk and change. And you wanted a third one. Did you?
Yep, if you have one.
I think the third one is be prepared to learn what it is that you want other people to do for you. If you have the type of business, in the type of business I have, there was a lot of things that I really didn't know about, like I mentioned, labor laws and HR. Be prepared to learn all that stuff, because it feels very uncomfortable if you don't know it.
Right. Is there a sense of vulnerability there as
Yes.
well? So ensure that you know.
Yeah.
At least try it.
Yeah,
yourself.
and there's resources around to teach you how to do things. You don't have to become the expert in it. You just have to know enough to know what is supposed to be done.
Right. That's empowering, because then you at least know that if someone's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, you have a little bit more insight.
Yeah,
That,
you know what's supposed to be happening. Yeah. So I think that, but be honest with yourself. Like even when I worked in pharma, I worked for larger companies that were very buttoned up. Policies, procedures were always in place. You had to have a meeting to decide if you were going to have a meeting. And even in that environment, I realized, no, I like working for smaller companies because there's something exciting always going on, and things aren't always falling into place. And then I would see people, I would always tell people coming into that industry, figure out which one of those people you are. Because if you are the person that requires to be in a very structured, large corporate environment, you're going to be very uncomfortable in the other type of environment. And I would say having your own business is a small company bolded. So make sure that you're comfortable with that.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your insight, and thank you for sharing with our viewers. We really appreciate this. Again, this is Philip calling from Spectrumx, and Renee Henriquez from ComforCare Central.
Thank you, Val.